Rizal at one point in his life did not have the idea to write a book as a means of sparking a flame that his country desperately needed. In May of 1882, he had yet to leave for Spain. Let us take a look at the bumpy road he traveled to conceive an idea that would change our nation forever. The specter of comparison is a phrase Rizal used to describe something he encountered during his 5-year stay in Europe. A consciousness that is awakened once exposed to a different culture, giving one the ability to see the familiar turn strange or extraordinary, or the strange turn familiar through comparisons between cultures. What does this have to do with how Noli Tangere came to be? First, we'd have to know the conditions Rizal was in when he thought of writing the book. He was nearly finished with his studies in Madrid, and the Círculo Hispano-Filipino had just been revived. The Círculo Hispano-Filipino was a group of Filipino and Spanish students, including Rizal, that had worked on a magazine that expressed their thoughts on the abusive Spanish government 2 years prior. The disbanding of the group due to the individualistic nature of some of the members disheartened Rizal as he saw great potential in the magazine being a voice of the Filipinos. This was in January of 1884, almost 2 years after his touchdown in Spain. At this point, he had experienced the beauty of France and the stark contrast Spain was to it. But this wasn't to say Spain was awful. It was just different in terms of social atmosphere and had a lot less public works. He had witnessed the political climate of Spain and the relatively free press, especially its newspapers to which he'd write to about religious corporations in the Philippines whenever relevant. The specter of comparison had reared its head, showing Rizal a different perspective on printed media. This was what led him to decide on writing a book with the newly revived Círculo Hispano-Filipino, a collection of essays about specific topics to form a volume of everything wrong in the Philippines. Except the Círculo weren't as focused as he had wanted, and he decided, quietly, to work on it himself. Over the course of the following months, the idea eventually turned into writing a novel, and so he began writing. This wasn't the entire story, however. Noli Tangere wasn't written without influences and bumps in the road. Rizal lived on scraps of food for days at a time, slept through the winter of 1885 with no heating, and almost died the next winter due to illness. On the opposite end, he experienced the hospitality and kindness of a few individuals, namely Pastor Karl Ulmer and Maximo Viola. Karl Ulmer helped Rizal very early spring in Heidelberg, Germany, right after Rizal almost turned into a popsicle. It was February of 1886. Rizal moved to Heidelberg from Paris to continue his ophthalmology study and training. Having trouble with the German language, he came across Karl Ulmer, who offered Rizal to come with him with his family back to Wilmsfeld, west of Heidelberg. For 2 months, Rizal learned and appreciated the German language and culture. It was this way of thought that once again evoked the specter of comparison. Spanish and German ways of thought. He was convinced that a calmer approach to writing his novel would be better, and so began revising his novel, which was almost done by the way, to fit this epiphany. Maximo Viola first met Rizal in Spain, but it was later on in Berlin, Germany, where Viola saved Rizal and his novel. It was December of 1886, and Rizal, nearly out of funds, was very sick from malnutrition due to eating only a plate of vegetables during lunch and small snacks during dinner, which he avoided whenever he could. He was almost at breaking point, even thinking about destroying his work on Noli after believing it would never be published due to his penniless predicament. Thankfully, Maximo Viola was in town, hoping to visit his friend. When Viola saw the state Rizal was in, he performed a medical checkup and over the course of the following days, observed him as he regained his strength and confidence. 2 months later, Viola helped Rizal publish Noli Tangere by loaning him 300 pesos to get 2,000 copies printed out. Without him, Rizal could have died much earlier than expected, never reaching his full potential. In the 5 years Rizal spent in Europe, he was regularly approached by the specter of comparisons. In the places he visited, the personalities he encountered, and the cultures he was exposed to. It was through these comparisons that led him to write Noli Tangere, and to an extent led to the beginning of nationalism in the Philippines through the constant comparisons of culture.